Welcome, Age of Vintage Society. Sean Connery was the original James Bond, a veritable superstar of the big screen and heartthrob. In the 1950s, Sean Connery was cast in numerous UK films and television programmes. In the early 60s, he landed the lead role of James Bond in Dr. No, continuing the role in follow-ups like Goldfinger and Thunderball, while gaining massive popularity. But with Sean Connery, there's something else that is deeply uncomfortable to reconcile with his status as a beloved actor. Why Sean Connery said "never again" to James Bond roles. Make sure to watch the video until the end and leave your thoughts in the comments. If you are new here, join our wonderful community by subscribing to the Age of Vintage channel. The world of cinema is peppered with stars whose reputation precedes them, celebrities who are so famous that their name serves as a shorthand for a character, franchise or trope. They are legends in their own time, seemingly beyond the grasp of mere mortals. Sean Connery, with his rumbling Scottish brogue, was one such actor. Connery hit the big time when he took on the mantle of Ian Fleming's famous spy, James Bond. For decades, and to some even today, he's been touted as the best of the Bonds, and the role afforded him a plethora of later opportunities. Connery's gritty and witty portrayal of the sexy and charismatic secret agent was largely responsible for the success of the film series. He was, and shall always be remembered as the original James Bond, whose indelible entrance into cinema history began when he announced those unforgettable words, "The name's Bond. James Bond." However, even though just about everyone recognises his name and face, the average moviegoer probably hasn't delved too deeply into Connery's personal life. He had long been known as a Hollywood sex symbol, having led a life dotted with intense love affairs with beautiful women. Much like his most iconic acting role as James Bond, he was the gorgeous model of a man. Long before he was James Bond, he was Thomas Sean Connery. He was born Connery on August 25, 1930, in Fountainbridge, Scotland. The son of Joe, a truck driver, and Euphemia, a laundress, Connery had a modest upbringing in a neighbourhood known as the Street of 1,000 Smells, for the stench of the local rubber mill and several breweries that filled the air. At first, friends called him Tommy, but he eventually chose to go by his middle name, Sean. More remarkable was his other nickname, Big Tam, which friends gave to him because of his size. At 12, Connery was already towering over his peers. By the time he was 18, he had reached his full height, a sturdy 6 foot 2 inches tall. His home was a 2-room flat where his brother slept in a bureau drawer because his parents couldn't afford a crib. "We were very poor," Connery has commented, "but I never knew how poor because that's how everyone was there. Joe brought home only a few shillings a week, and those were often spent on whiskey or gambling." Born to a working-class family in 1930, Thomas Sean Connery had a childhood that belied the glamorous life for which he was eventually destined, including leaving school at an early age to begin working to help his family get by. Before he was even 16 years old, he got his first job as a milkman in his hometown. "I had no qualifications at all for a job, and unemployment has always been very high in Scotland. Anyway, so you take what you get. I was a milkman, labourer, steel bender, cement mixer, virtually anything." He received his early education from Tollcross Elementary School. He was good at mathematics and also had a keen interest in reading. He used to go fishing with his brother and skipped school for extracurricular activities. He left school at age 13 and joined the British Royal Navy. He joined when he was still a teen, and like sailors often do, he had 2 tattoos inked into his arm, one which says Mum and Dad, and the other Scotland Forever. These were covered with makeup during movie shoots. And he might well have continued a career at sea, but a duodenal ulcer required a medical discharge. He would receive a disability pension for a while after leaving the Navy, and this would help support him as he began to work in the theatre. Now that he was discharged and World War II over, jobs in the civilian sector could be hard to come by, and after a second short stint delivering milk, the one-time sailor found himself working as a lifeguard, lorry driver, male model, and even polishing coffins. He also began seeking and getting bit parts in several movies and on the London stage, and to help pay the bills while he struggled to find greater roles, he occasionally worked as a babysitter for a local journalist and his wife. However, it was a long and bumpy road before he found his calling. For months he skimped and saved shillings to become a member of the Dunedin weightlifting club. It was not so much to be fit, but to look good for the girls, he once admitted. The local ladies were impressed, but so were his fellow gym mates, who nominated him for the Mr. Universe contest. A local casting director in attendance liked the hammy Scottish kid and asked him to join the chorus of a new production, the Rodgers and Hammerstein musical South Pacific, playing on Drury Lane in London's theatre district. I didn't have a voice, couldn't dance, Connery admitted, but I could look good standing there. One rehearsal was all it took. I decided then and there to make acting my career. Over the next few years, Connery was cast in numerous films and television programmes, including a much acclaimed BBC staging of Requiem for a Heavyweight. But his lack of education worried him, and he thus began reading the classics, including Proust, Tolstoy and Joyce. He moved his way up through the ranks. Finally, his big break came. Producers cast him opposite starlet Lana Turner in Another Time, Another Place. During this time, Connery met Terence Young, who was to be the director of the James Bond films. Compared to many of his fellow actors, Connery was quite rugged and rough, but that changed in August 1957 when, while filming a TV show for Britain's ATV Playhouse, he met a beautiful blonde Australian actress named Diane Cilento. She was married at the time, but Connery's attraction to her was undeniable. Connery was definitely a ladies' man, and he got started very early. The actor revealed that he lost his virginity when he was 14 years old to an older woman who was working for the ATS, Auxiliary Territory Service, a woman's branch of the British Army that operated during World War II. When he was a struggling actor, Sean Connery met young and rising actress Shelley Winters through a mutual friend, British journalist Peter Noble, for whom Connery had been occasionally babysitting. They were introduced at Noble's house and eventually ended up at the flat Sean shared with his brother Neil, and the romance would continue for a number of years on both sides of the Atlantic. Shelley would later describe Sean as one of the tallest and most charming and masculine Scotsmen she'd ever seen. Winters had affairs with many of Hollywood's leading men, including actors Clark Gable, Burt Lancaster, Robert Mitchum, and even a fling with John F. Kennedy. But Sean, she would later reveal, wasn't just wonderful in bed, but in every way she could imagine. One of their trysts occurred during a train ride from London to Liverpool, where she said they pulled down the blinds and made love during the entire journey. They eventually went their separate ways, each marrying another person, but the many evenings she spent at his flat drinking beer with Sean and his brother were memories she would always cherish. Sean's heart has already belonged to another woman. In 1959, just as Connery's career was taking off, his love, Cilento, contracted tuberculosis, and the actor realised how devastated he would be if he lost her. He turned down a big break in the Charlton Heston film El Cid to be close to her while she recovered. The decision didn't hurt his career. In fact, 20th Century Fox Studios came calling with a contract, and Connery made several films in Hollywood. When the contract was up, he had another stroke of luck. Producers Harry Saltzman and Albert Cubby Broccoli cast him as the lead in a spy movie based on one of a series of Ian Fleming novels. Bond, James Bond, was born. The 1962 film Dr. No showcased the spy contending with the arch-villain title character and his quest to control American-launched rockets. It was the role that set the man from humble beginnings on a path to become a Hollywood legend. The film was an instant success, propelling the little-known Connery into fame virtually overnight. 2 sequels were released immediately, From Russia with Love and the international blockbuster Goldfinger. Goldfinger may not have been his first outing as the operative, but by this time he'd mastered the aura of devil-may-care suaveness and cold-hearted ruthlessness. Thunderball fared even better at the box office, and You Only Live Twice followed. His acting career now cemented, Connery decided it was time to settle his personal affairs as well. Diane was now divorced, and the pair wed secretly at the Rock of Gibraltar in November 1962, but they divorced in 1973. They shared a son, Jason. Then in 1975, Connery wed Rock Brune, who had 3 children from previous marriages, Oliver, Mika and Stefan, all of whom became Connery's stepchildren. Sly, sexy and confident, with questionable scruples, Connery as Bond was the embodiment of the British secret agent to many, even if he did have to wear a toupee to cover his prematurely balding head. James Bond made the actor a very wealthy man, but at 53 he may just be reaching the peak of his career. Some believe that such a career-defining role might leave him unable to escape it, but he proved the doubters wrong, becoming one of the most notable film actors of his generation, with a host of great movies to his name. Connery had a notable non-Bond role in Alfred Hitchcock's psychological thriller Marnie, along with other projects like The Hill, A Fine Madness, Shalako and The Molly Maguires. Connery wanted to slow the pace of the James Bond series and complete a feature every 18 months instead of each year, but the nation was Bond crazy and the films were a goldmine. Connery agreed to star in Diamonds Are Forever in 1971, demanding a salary of $1.25 million plus a percentage. At that time it was an unprecedented sum of money for such a role. After completing the film, Connery said "never again" to Bond roles and donated all of his salary to the Scottish International Education Trust, an organisation he had founded to assist young Scots in obtaining an education. He declared his last role as Bond in 1971's Diamonds Are Forever, with the part taken over by Roger Moore in 1973's Live and Let Die. After the Bond films, Connery focused on movie roles he found interesting. He would also do films if he felt his help was needed. Connery was a movie legend for about 4 decades. In the early 2000s, Connery played just 2 roles before abruptly retiring. His last was the unlikely superhero Alan Quatermain in The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and Connery later told The Hollywood Reporter that working on that movie was the final straw. Angry at the director and frustrated with the movie's commercial failures, Connery decided to retire. The last one I did, director Stephen Norrington was given $85 million to make a movie in Prague, but unfortunately he wasn't certified before he started because he would have been arrested for insanity, Connery said bluntly. So we worked as well as we could, and I ended up being heavily involved in the editing and trying to salvage. In that same 2018 interview, Connery even said that he turned down a role in Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull, despite having appeared in the previous instalment. Well into his retirement at that point, Connery said, "I spoke with Spielberg, but it didn't work out. It was not that generous a part, worth getting back into the harness and go for, and they had taken the story in a different line anyway, so the father of Indy was kind of really not that important. I had suggested they kill him in the movie. It would have taken care of it better." Connery gave his reasons for leaving the entertainment industry behind, though it might have been a confluence of events that truly drove him into retirement. The opening that September of the third 007 movie Goldfinger had eclipsed even the success of the previous Bond blockbusters, but its star, Sean Connery, suddenly the biggest film actor in the world, was a man in turmoil. Unable to cope with being thrust into superstardom, Connery had become a prisoner at his home, a converted London nunnery. Day and night it was encircled by a baying mob of female fans, who thought nothing of climbing in through windows in the hope of getting close to their pin-up, or burgling the house when he was away to steal mementos of the screen's secret agent. He tried to come to terms with his troubling new fame. Meanwhile, a personal scandal may have contributed to his retreat from the spotlight as well. At the end he had had enough from Hollywood and retired to his home in Nassau, Bahamas. He passed away there on Friday night at age 90. Known for his paradoxical mixture of rough-and-tumble Scotsman combined with graceful self-possession, Connery was highly esteemed in the film world before his recent passing. But his life was not without a handful of scandals and adventures. If you liked this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you are new here, and if you want to support my work, please visit my Patreon page. Now it is your turn. What do you think about the life and legacy of Sean Connery? He was a 20th century movie icon.